Hitchens, in the course of his whole talk, paints a very scary, tyrannical picture of a moody, immature God. And if that's what defines theism, then I'm an atheist too. Honestly, I agree that that is a ridiculous view of God. But the personal God that I believe in, and the God taught by the largest church in the world, is not the caricature that he draws. As I watched, I was a little surprised at how little logic or real argumentation there was. Almost the whole talk consisted of a straw man version of God and emotional appeal, and then he finishes with an insult to anyone who believes in anything like what he said. All in all, though, it is very psychologically powerful, but not logically compelling. One good point that he made in the beginning is that deism is not the same thing as theism, and that getting from a first cause or prime mover type of deism to a personal God, theism, is a big step. So I would like to explain just a couple of the reasons why I am a theist, and in the process, the type of God I believe in and the basis for morality should be made more clear. We'll do this with some philosophy and show some good reasons for believing in theism, and then also talk about the God of the largest church in the world, Roman Catholicism, and how Hitchens' caricature falls far short. First of all, everything that we observe around us begins and ends and changes over time, and they all come from something else. Therefore, they are all contingent or dependent things. They do not contain the cause of their own existence, nor is existence part of their essence. If it was part of their essence to exist, then they would always exist in the fullness of their being. Even the universe itself does not contain the cause of its own existence. Keep in mind here that we're talking about philosophy and metaphysics here, not science. This is really beyond the boundaries of science. Everything that exists, then, depends on something for its existence, and that thing can only be something with necessary existence, the very essence of existence. By its very nature, this is the very act of existingness itself. And that thing is God. So far then, we have one basic idea about God, which we really can't wrap our minds around, but we get a couple of other important ideas that follow immediately. First of all, the act of existingness is perfect in and of itself. Nothing can be added to it or taken away from it because, by its very essence, it is the fullness of existingness. And since it is the fullness of existingness, it is pure action, without any passivity. It does not receive information passively. Any information about creation that it has, if it creates, it has in itself through knowledge of itself. And therefore, God does not have to create. He has no moral obligation to create. Also, since time and space are themselves things that can change and that exist, God is non-spatial and atemporal. I hope it's obvious already how different this picture of God is from the one that Hitchens paints. Secondly, no one has ever seen the number 3. What we usually call the number 3 is just a symbol for the number 3. You see, the number 3 is an abstract object, something not made of atoms or material, it's not concrete, but it only exists as an idea that lives in the mind of a person. All mathematical objects, the rules of mathematics, the rules of logic, the laws of science, truth, justice, beauty, and goodness are all abstract and without any concrete physical reality. Since we humans can deal with abstract objects, it means that we have some abstract component to us. Since no mere concrete thing restricted to programs and algorithms could understand abstract objects. But this abstract, intelligent part of us has to have some higher source, since an effect cannot be greater than the cause. This source is that same essence of existence we discovered earlier, and that means each individual intelligence has to come directly from God. This God, then, is the creator, and he creates each unique individual soul, which is part of what theism says. Now, God does not create us and then a separate arbitrary moral law that we have to follow. Instead, he creates us with a specific nature, and the law is nothing more than a primer on running the human machine. Since we have to learn and grow, he gives us innate moral sensibilities, which are not worthless, and he gives us some moral law to help us learn some of the things that we might not otherwise have figured out on our own. It is only when we live most fully in accord with our nature that we can be truly happy. The ancient Greeks had figured that much out, and that, in the end, is what Christian morality is all about. After all, St. Irenaeus said, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." So morality depends on our nature. For example, since we are social by nature, we have an obligation to interact with others in a way that contributes to society and therefore not harm others. And since morality depends on nature, and God's nature is perfectly self-sufficient, God has no moral obligation to create or do anything in particular for his creatures. He'd be perfectly justified to create whatever universe he wanted, and then just let it be. However, since we exist and have rational natures which can only come from God, then we know that He creates each of our souls individually. And because of God's nature, every good thing comes from Him, since He is the source of every perfection. Now, I realize that this picture of God seems quite different from what most people hear from most religious people, so I understand how someone could get a very different idea of God from religious people, but this is part of what the largest church in the world, the Roman Catholic Church, teaches about God. It's an intellectually and philosophically rigorous idea of God. But what about all the stuff that Hitchens brings up? First of all, God is not on constant surveillance. No moment would exist were it not for God's already first thinking it. There's nothing passive in God. What about God caring about every detail of our life? Well, God cares about the decisions we make for our sake and for the sake of our true happiness, not for His own. We can't hurt Him. What about the appeal to beauty of science over religion? Well, first of all, Hitchens contrasts the beauty of these elegant theories, and they are elegant, with very primitive versions of revelation, not the highly developed and beautiful theology of Aquinas and Augustine and other theologians. Also, the beauty and intelligibility of the universe points to God. Many have argued that the intelligibility and beauty of science is really evidence for God. What about the atrocities and oddities in the Old Testament? The Church teaches that those writings express the developing understanding of God, like the way a child's understanding of his parents and the way parents deal with their children develop over time. What about the judgment of God for every little thing, even, quote, sinning in our sleep, something he says? The Church teaches that there are three aspects to the morality of every action. One, knowledge of the right thing to do, full control of the will to do that right thing, and that it is actually the right thing. So it's not really possible to sin in our sleep. And God knows our circumstances and judges us accordingly. What about the time before the writing of the Old Testament, where Hitchens paints a horrible picture of misery? First of all, it probably wasn't as bad as Hitchens makes it sound, since he himself praises our innate sense of justice and right and wrong, which is not worthless again, and historical records do show societies functioning and flourishing. The main point, though, is that physical pleasure and comfort are not our greatest good, and also, God judges us according to our circumstances. So in summary, it is a jump to go from deism to theism, but even philosophical investigation can get us there once we understand the nature of God and creation. And the straw man that Hitchens creates and ridicules simply does not do justice to the God of at least Roman Catholicism.